There's something about our mathematics system that encourages the dis-ease that we have in the monetary system. And the dis-ease that we have in the monetary system is, or can be, directly attributed to hypotheticals, as far as I can tell. And then if you look to mathematics, where's the hypothetical aspect of math? And the hypothetical aspect of math comes from the numbers that are underneath zero. Zero is an illogical number to begin with, but then when you start going negative numbers, then that's pure inversion of what is clearly logical, which is positive numbers. You can't have negative 10 apples. And we've built into the language of math systems of thought that rationalize negative numbers, like the word subtract. Subtract ion. It's always ions. Ions everywhere. The problem with subtraction is that we're taking something that the mind understands, which is, say, apples are nice, right? Apples are nice and round. They seem to exist. 10 apples. Subtract 5 apples. What do you have? We all remember these word problems. You have 10 apples, you subtract 5 apples, you have what? You have 5 apples. And then that's where the problem ends, and you move on to the next problem. And it seems fine and dandy, but it's not, because you have taken 5 apples that are there and they're tangible, and you've turned them into hypotheticals because you're not accounting for where these 5 apples went. You're just saying they are no longer there. 10 apples minus 5 apples equals 5 apples. And to fix this illogic problem, all you have to do is substitute the word transfer for subtract. And voila, you have apples are accounted for. And you don't have to worry about negative apples and hypothetical apples. So 10 apples, transfer 5 apples. Now you see that there are clearly 5 apples remaining in the space, and 5 apples have been moved away from the space. And the 5 apples that have been moved away are accounted for. They are somewhere. The subtraction pretense has the same logic in it as the scientific experiment, which pretends that you can isolate any set of phenomena from the whole rest of the thing, which is a big joke. You can't isolate any of it. You can only isolate it in thought. And yes, this goes back to the all is one idea, which isn't an idea, that's a felt experience once you defrag yourself. But it's a necessary thing on the path back to an internal wholeness, because these hypothetical negative numbers, they give permission for nonsense like debt to exist. If you didn't have negative numbers, there wouldn't be any debt. If you didn't have a below the zero on the number line, where's the debt coming from? Because everyone deep inside knows that debt is pretend. 100% pretend. We don't have any problem saying 3 apples is a reality. I can hold 3 apples in my hand. This is not an issue. To say you owe 3 apples, you're talking unreality there. It's not existence. You're talking probabilities and possibilities. And that's how the rat race treadmill is kept going, because on higher levels of this negative number thought experiment, the thing is allowed to keep going up and up and up and up and up and up inevitably via debt. The debt only goes up, never goes down. And as far as I know, nobody that I've ever talked to that supports the system ever could explain this. Oh, it's fine if the debt goes up and up and up forever and ever and ever and never ever goes down. It's fine that debt can never ever be repaid, although every American has guilt inside of them for not paying all their debt off. All these very obvious and blatant contradictions are totally perfectly fine. So it's built within the number language. This debt, the second you get into debt, you're crossing into the projection system. Project, ion, subtract ions, all these ions everywhere. Ions everywhere. The second that you get into negative numbers and debt, you're going from the tangible reality. Like, you could say the number 10 is attributed to my hand. There are 10 fingers. Right? These are very real fingers, and I know them pretty well. And I can still say this number 10 surrounding the fact of my fingers. But in terms of numbers, the second that you go outside of positive numbers, you are going into the impersonal. And it does work to an extent as a hypothetical, but when, say, the bank gives you a loan, and they create $5,000 out of thin air and they write it off on their books, and now you have $5,000 on your books. Okay, the $5,000 that was sort of the prime mover of that situation of the $5,000, the rational part of it is the you, the one that walked into the bank, the human living being that walked into the bank. That's a known. That's not a hypothetical. And the problem comes in where you are expected to so the bank magically creates the $5,000, and then you are also supposed to magically create the $5,000 as well and give it back to the bank. So there have been two $5,000 created, sort of both out of thin air. And I know that this may seem a bit odd to think about, and I'm not saying I have all the answers regarding money and math. This is very simply my thoughts about it right now. But I do know that the second you go into debt, with the bank. Now you're $5,000 in debt, and you're expected to produce that, and of course, in addition to interest, which is another subject of its own. Okay, the tangible reality of the $5,000 that you represent by walking into the bank has been translated into the impersonal possibility of bringing $5,000 in more energy back into the bank. And the bank doesn't give a shit where you get that $5,000. It has become an unreality. It is the second that you walk out with that number on your ledger, it's in the probability fields. It's not in the tangible fields, because you can run out into society and try and procure that $500 however you see fit. You could go ask your grandma, give me $5,000. The bank wants it. You could start a lemonade stand. Hey guys, I need to replenish this $5,000 that the bank magically created for me, and I need to magically create it back for the bank. So I need to get your guys' energy. But it's all a pulling of a hypothetical energy out from the system. So it turns from a personal fact, the original $5,000, which is you walking into the bank, and then it turns from that into, it goes into the probability field. And that may or may not exist. Your ability to recreate that $5,000 may not exist. Which is why people lose their homes and things like this. It's just, it's a thought fuck is what it really is. The money system with negative numbers is a mental fuck. And it never ends. Like, the whole point of the system is to keep people in perpetual mental entrainment to these numbers. If you weren't in perpetual mental entrainment to these numbers dancing around on your computer screen via Bank of the West or whatever other educational employees credit union, Golden West, there's 1,000 billion banks. And they're not even holding anything anymore, really. They're holding hypotheticals. What was the other one? There are lots of banks. Golden One Credit Union. I can't think of a lot of them. I think because I'm not a huge fan of banks, but you don't need negative numbers. Negative numbers go hand in hand with the Catholic idea of original sin. Everything in this system was built to make the individual feel guilty for existing. And then your inevitable savior is called whoever it's called, and you are guilted towards that via fear, via lack. That's just what it is. So those are a few thoughts on negative numbers and debt. I know I'm a walking contradiction in the fact that I speak abstractly and when I'm trying to make things into the rational, I understand that aspect of it, but I understood and reconciled the fact that most of us are walking, talking paradoxes, And there's nothing to do about that while we're here. Unless you remove the mind via meditation. Which is possible, but not forever. But it's not hard to see the sort of insidious nature of negative numbers. Also, when you add interest into the mix, and if you consider that possibly this Earth realm isn't a closed loop system and that there are other realms and worlds out there, the fact that the economy needs to continually grow in order to avoid succumbing to inflation, because inflation has always been a problem and it has always caused economies to crash. If it's not a closed loop system, then this incessant need for growth in order to not self-implode gives rise to the possibility of the sickness of the system spreading out outside of the local or outside of the Earth part. So the sickness may spread out into other planets, or may spread out into other areas of the flat Earth plane that we don't know about, that other people hint at when they're making these maps. That, oh, there's hidden land, or there's this, or there's that. The instability of the economic system, which was deliberately made, makes it so the illness is prepared to spread as soon as the banksters find out about new areas to conquest. Those are just some early morning thoughts on it. Don't take it too terribly seriously, but let me know what you think about these negative numbers and debt. Alright guys, peace.